My name is Kuntala Lahiri-Dutt. I'm a professor at the Australian National University. I was supposed to go to this conference and I was so looking forward to it. But I just couldn't go. I'm very sorry. There are compelling medical reasons for my not being there. I hope you would understand. Around the year 2000, when I started doing research on river islands, people had hardly been aware of the existence of river islands. Of course, many people had heard of Majuli because it was the largest river island in the world. But nobody really knew about those tiny little impermanent, pieces of land that literally float inside the rivers, but also sustain millions and millions of people's lives. What were the reasons behind that? First, the idea was that rivers were carriers of only water. They carry only water, pure H2O, no silt, no sediment. So there was no imagination about what goes on inside the river with those silt and sediments. There was also the idea that it is actually an epistemological problem, that the Darwinian belief that rivers were like organisms. They go through a life cycle, youth, maturity and old age. And this applies to all rivers, everywhere, at all points of time. Now that's a very problematic question. Many geographers, which is my discipline, they spend their lifetime drawing rivers on maps, on pieces of paper, just as the lines, many lines cutting over the rivers. So the idea of rivers was almost that they were part of this physical world, nothing to do with human beings, and they have to be measured, estimated, calculated. The water flow within it has to be calculated. That was a problematic that river island studies wanted to examine. What has made this turn around possible? To put it very briefly, a radical shift has taken place in the way we think of water. Today, discussions of hydrology are never without the social. A number of factors have led to this growing attention to the hydrosocial, the amphibious worlds that are within the rivers. Theoretically, there has been a shift away from the society-nature dualisms to a more holistic and diverse contextual understanding of hydrosociality. River islands are at the heart of this reimagination of waters as different, rivers as multiple, diverse and contextual, each enriched by history as well as the local territory. The river islands are the quintessential hybrid worlds that by their very existence in the middle of rivers, by creating those legal fictions but living realities, destabilize many old and established notions. One of these notions is the way conventional science had separated land and water as two separate entities. Another is that we now see that many more people actually live their day-to-day lives on the water, on the river, in the river, and with the river, not always hugging the banks but dancing to the rise and fall of the waters as the river changes its moods. This brings me to the critical question of river islands in the Anthropocene. We know that Paul Crutzen and Eugene Stomer used the term Anthropocene in 2000 They have overwhelming global evidence that, from atmospheric, geologic, hydrologic, biospheric, and other Earth system processes, that the current geological time period is human influenced or anthropogenic. There are also lots of contestations about Anthropocene. It remains a catchy word, but never widely accepted. Some people believe that Anthropocene started when the megafauna were extincted. Other people believe that it started with the European invasion and colonization of the Americas. And finally, then there are people who believe that the Anthropocene started with the advent of the Industrial Revolution around 1800, followed by the Great Acceleration in the mid-20th century. What is most typical of Anthropocene is that it invokes the image of humans as Homo faber, man the maker, humans who make things. So what do? They manipulate the natural world for human purposes and ends. But in the Anthropocene, the idea of the Homo faber becomes superseded by Homo consumens, humanity the consumers, and Homo colossus, which is a term that was coined by William Catton to signify humans as bent on consuming exhaustible resources, including water. A very interesting critique of the concept itself says that the term Anthropocene implies a flat world without inequalities. Andreas Malm and Alf Hornberg add their critical voice to presumptions embedded in the Anthropocene grand narrative, and they argue that it jumps far too quickly from natural science and geology to an assessment of the impact of the whole species, Homo sapiens, thus missing the critical and crucial textured social elements that are woven into human histories. Anthropocene assumes that all anthropos, that is humans, are responsible equally for environmental degradation and puts the blame on everyone equally. People from the majority world contest this notion and point out that it is only the minority world whose sole focus on economic growth, resource-intensive lifestyle, consumption habits, and all that sort of thing have brought the world to its knees. What do river islands have to do with the Anthropocene? Indeed, rivers are the allegory of the Anthropocene. As river regimes change in response to rainfall variation and changes in weather phenomena, river islands, along with the millions of people who live there, become more and more vulnerable to changing climate. That is easily understood. The main question that we need to address is how are river islands changing how we define, explain, and live in the Anthropocene? This is the main question that this conference will ask. I have some observations about this, but let me tell you a story first, and that will explain. When I was doing the research on Damodar chores with Professor Gopa Samanto, my good colleague, we came across a man. His name was Naren Sarkar. He had come across the border from Bangladesh to live into the Damodar chore that was called Bhashapur. Bhasha in our Bengali language, as you know, it means literally floating, the chore that is floating, Bhashapur. That's where he used to live. Naren built a hut there, a mud hut with straw thatch that was flooded away, washed away during the 1978 floods. So what did he do? He built again. He bought some more land and he built again. and he also made a boat for himself. So when during the monsoons the river water rises, he keeps an eye on the river water. How much is the river water rising? He also keeps his ears open to listen to the riverbank erosion's sounds. He knows each sound when the riverbank breaks, erodes, sometimes with a sound of an explosion, sometimes with a thud, and he knows what is serious, what is dangerous, and when he has to leave. So with the water's rise, he's ready with his boat and his family with some food in that boat. He knows when to leave. This is a very interesting way to live with the river. We asked Norin, how do you live like this? And he said, we are like the drifting grains of sand. Here today, there tomorrow. We roll with the river's flow. We are always with the river's flow. That is something that river islands can teach and teach us. That is something that river islands present to us in redefining the Anthropocene. This continual adjustment, rising above the traumatic and difficult circumstances posed by an environment that is generally presented as hostile, forces us to rethink the bigger global ecological concepts of adaptation and resilience of human communities to the changed climate and weather phenomena of the Anthropocene. We do not really have many examples of people who can cope with these weather phenomena changes, do we? I mean, not talking about the remote indigenous tribes in Brazilian Amazon, but around us. So people who live on river islands, their ability to adjust to what is commonly seen as an insecure environment gives us an entry point to rethink the meanings of the Anthropocene and the human condition therein. We no longer see humans in an eternal struggle against nature, but as humans who can help us to decolonize the Anthropocene from the ground up. The river's regime changes might be serious with very long-term implications, but the changes are experienced slowly by the river people who adjust to these changing conditions on a day-to-day basis. In a way, they play the lottery with nature every day and adjust on a daily basis to the river rather than to adapt. With that story, I will end here today. I am very grateful that you patiently listened to my talk, and I hope that you are going to enjoy the discussions over the next 2 days and many more aspects of river islands would come out during these conversations. I hope that in future we will be able to build up a study group or at least a network of people working on river islands. That would be a fantastic outcome of this conference. I wish you all the best and enjoy your 2 days in this conference. Thank you very much.